Welcome to Click for IB Biology, where we continue our study of the mechanism of evolution, natural selection, and we're now applying natural selection theory and sexual selection theory to the study of guppies, which are fish creatures. This is the work of John Endler, who was working in Trinidad. There's a blank version of this presentation. That's a PDF. That's linked down in the description below, where you will also find 10 questions with answers. You can use those to secure your understanding of this content. So here's John Endler, and John was working on the islands of Trinidad and Tobago, and there he was studying a small fish known as a guppy. And the guppies, he noticed in the ponds, were either small. So these fish here, they're pretty small, about the size of a thumb, small fish, and they were dull in color. And contrastingly, the same species of fish, so these are the same guppies, were also seemed to be colorful and large, but those were in different ponds. So Endler's interest was in how this came about, and he was aware of the Pike Cichlid. Now this is a predatory fish, and he noticed that this predatory fish tended to be found where we had the small and dull species. So let's take a look at Endler's work. So as I've just mentioned, there were the two forms of the same species of fish, and the dull and smaller fish tended to be found in ponds which were accessible to this predatory pike cichlid fish here. And the argument in the evolutionary sense, this is a natural selection argument, is that where the fish had bright colors and were large, this made them easy prey for the cichlid fish. It was better for these fish to be small and dull colors, and this meant that it was more difficult for the pike cichlid to actually feed upon them. And so the selection is against this fish, but in favor of this fish here. And this is a utilitarian process, which means that it's for the survival of predation, and favored this particular form of the fish. Now, in contrast, where the ponds often higher up in the river system were inaccessible to the pike cichlids, so they couldn't get there, what happened was that the colorful and larger fishes were more common than the smaller and dull ones. And that over time, the colors became brighter and the fish became larger as they became involved in a sexual selection process in which colorful and size were favored, so that the larger and more colorful fish survived better. There had no influence of the predator, and so in these isolated ponds, isolated from the predation, we had an increase in the biodiversity and in the size of the fish, whereas that diversity was lower and the fish were smaller where the predator was available. So this example here is natural selection, and the changes that we're seeing in this one is sexual selection. Endler's work went on to investigate by manipulating these variables, by moving the fish from one pond to another, variously doing things such as the introduction of the predator into this type of pond, and as you might expect, that drove the colorful and large fish to become more like the duller and smaller fish as seen in the accessible ponds. And so there were various permutations on this process. You might like to take a little while to design an experiment of your own to investigate these factors involved in the selection, natural selection, or sexual selection of non-utilitarian features which I've seen in Endler's Guppies in Trinidad and Tobago. If you're studying higher level biology, then the links to the higher level videos are now appearing on the left hand side. The playlists are still on the right hand side for everyone, and the chance to subscribe to the channel. That would be greatly appreciated.